Wenceslas looked out on the feast of Stephen, when the snow lay round about, deep and crisp and even. Brightly shone the moon that night, though the frost was through.
Hello there, I'm here today at the lovely Covent Garden Christmas lights, and the reason why I'm here is because I'm going to be recording an audio version very shortly of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens playing Ebenezer Scrooge for AJ Productions.
Hi Mark, what's it like to take on such an iconic character?
Well, to play Ebenezer Scrooge has always been an ambition of mine. I've auditioned for it several times over the years and always been told that I'm too young for it yet. So to actually play it first of all on audio is a really lovely way around it, and I can concentrate on properly delivering the vocal range of the character rather than what he just looks like.
You've done quite a lot of audio work recently.
Yes, I have. I've been very lucky because while everything was suddenly very quiet, I was able to fall back on my voice. It started off in 2020 with The Matchstick Girl, which is coming out again online in December, and then that will be followed by this production, again by the same production company, and then I did The Signalman by Charles Dickens, an adaptation, and more recently it was Ruptured Duck, the true life story of a disabled young lady. So it's great to be able to have that skill to fall back on when things are quite hard to find work at all.
Have you found it more difficult to work the past 2 years?
Well, I have to say, it has been difficult obviously because everything was closed for a good 18 months. Even productions on telly were restricted to just the soaps, and slowly it's coming back to life. I was lucky enough to do an outside production of The Sound of Music in the summer. I was really happy to do a collaboration again with the National Film School, doing Chip in the Sugar by Alan Bennett in 2020, and as I said, I started to do audio work. So it's really lovely to finish off the year with such a interesting and iconic character as Ebenezer Scrooge.
Hello and welcome to the interval of The Sound of Music.
Hello guys, tell us about the Sound of Music production and who you play.
I play Admiral von Schreiber, who is the head of the Austrian Navy.
And I play Rolf, who starts off as a telegram boy and at some point between Act 1 and 2 becomes a radicalised Nazi.
Have you worked for Bonzo Production before?
Once before I did a production back in 2019. Last year I think that was, I did Romeo and Juliet. I played Romeo, which is great. Yeah, that was my only experience with it.
I've
And you,
not
Mark?
worked with them before, and having worked on this hill, I'm not sure I'm going to rush back in a hurry. But no, it's been a joy.
How it feels working in this production on this place?
Well, being outside, I've never actually performed outside before. So for me, it was a real learning curve. Apart from the fact that you have to really use your voice very clearly, it's very, you know, I've just got everything crossed, it's not going to rain.
And the setting is absolutely perfect for something like this, Sound of Music.
Yeah.
Being in, because we've got the church, we've got the manor house, we've got the hills, it's perfect setting.
And it looks lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark, this isn't your first time working at the National Film School, is it?
No, the first time I worked there was in 2001 in a new film called Two's Company, where I played the brother of a very incestuous relationship. And then I was asked back in 2011 to take part in Shakespeare's Villains, playing Richard III, and more recently in 2015 I played the lead in Whose Life Is It Anyway, Ken Harrison. and I'm delighted to be back in 2020 to play Graham Whittaker in Chip in the Sugar.
Was it difficult getting into character?
Not really, because Graham is a middle-aged man who is gay and has a very close relationship with his mother, and I am all of those three things. But what was hard for me was maintaining the accent over a long period of time.
Did you or the director deliberately choose not to show your disability?
Not really. I don't think it was a deliberate choice. I think the character is naturally sitting in his armchair in his bedroom telling the story, and it is so beautifully written by Alan Bennett that it's very easy to draw the audience in. Probably it's the worst kind of character I've ever played in my whole life. I've been working professionally for over 34 years now, and I always seem to get cast as the young man that's become hit by a car or paralysed from an accident or whatever for obvious reasons. And this particular character is probably the least nice person I've ever played, which is why it attracted me, really, because I'd never normally get cast in those roles.
So it must be really fun to explore the darker side of those characters.
It is really lovely. I mean, you know, he is the pinnacle of the whole piece and kind of draws it all to a kind of dramatic end. And he appears in the play to be a victim of the war and a victim of what's happened to him, and as the play unravels, you certainly discover otherwise.
And that's an interesting tale as well, having disabled actor, because like you said, often the disabled person is the victim. You know, they're a nice person who's when in real life people
they're just as complicated as everybody
exactly
else.
And that must be
and it's
nice
lovely to play something with so many different levels.
Do you see more of those roles as an actor now coming out, or are we still some way behind?
We are coming forward. I mean, I'd love to sit here and say in 34 years there's been a massive change. There hasn't been. There hasn't been a massive change. The change is happening slowly, but it is happening. We need to get to the same point with disabled casting as we have become with racial casting. And people are no longer cast just to play the black maid. They're cast because they can act and do a good job. And there's no reason why I can't play a lawyer. There's no reason why I can't play a husband. But obviously, you have to cast within a realistic range. You have to cast. It's no good casting me as a ballet dancer. I could play a ballet dancer who used to dance. I can't play one now. So obviously, it has to have a realism to it, I think. And that's why the beauty of this particular character is that he was able-bodied once upon a time, but when we join him in the play, he's come back from the war injured.
How were you someone who knew an awful lot about the First World War before you entered it, or would you go under a learning process about it?
I knew quite a bit because I'd already done a play earlier in my career, in my 30s, about the very same, about the same subject. So as a result of that, I was kind of semi-prepared. And because it was a brand new play, it's been written by a wonderful writer called Alfie James, and we've got a great cast, a great young, exciting cast. And so because I'd done the performance before in August at the Albany Theatre in Deptford and then the Arts Theatre in Leicester Square. It's a really nice family. I know people say that a lot, and they sit here and go, oh, I'm really happy, blah, blah, blah. But it's true. We have a really nice family, and it's lovely that it has another life.
London can be a challenging city. Noise, traffic and crowds make it hard to get around, with many obstacles to overcome. But for disabled people, the challenges are even greater, especially when it comes to using public transport and getting access to some venues. This week, we hear from disabled Londoners about their experiences and the many barriers that can often prevent them leading a normal life. Gareth Furby has more.
Mark is an actor, he's disabled, and this is the entrance to a West End venue.
I'm not going to let a flight of stairs stop me from performing in the West End.
This is the only route because there's no disabled access.
It's difficult, but
As you can see, it's not impossible.
Mark is due to perform here in a play about the First World War.
Pity? I don't need your pity. I am a general.
He was born with cerebral palsy and has been a professional actor for more than 30 years. But he says it's hard to work in most London theatres because so many are so old with little disabled access, especially backstage. How much of this can you actually get access to?
Just this level, I think. It wouldn't be possible to work in this space. But this theatre is not alone. It's in many, many London theatres.
Mark says the theatres are improving, but they'd both like a little more to be done. Gareth Furby, BBC London News.
Everybody's in the same boat. Everybody has some sort of physical or sensory disability, and they're desperately wanting to get their stories heard, their abilities seen, and to be out there within the media. And what's terribly inspiring is that all of us have come on this journey together, and there is strength in numbers and strength in finding a voice, and we've all done that.
Working with somebody with sort of physical disabilities, that doesn't kind of, I mean, the only thing I just consider things like for example, the staging, the room, the venue. I look at those sorts of things, trying to make sure that it's fully accessible.
Yeah.
Whereas like making sure that you've just got that little bit more space, looking at the furniture on stage, those sorts of things. And then it's basically comes down to communication, doesn't it, really? Chatting to people in rehearsal, chatting to you and saying,
actually learning
trying things out.
Yeah, and learning
seeing what works and
what's
what
good
doesn't.
for both of you.
Yeah, this is it. And
it's a process of going through the motions to discover the best.
Yeah, definitely. It's like what entrances to use and whether to put a piece of furniture there and
Yeah, but I mean, we moved today into a completely different space.
Yeah, we did, and we sorted it.
And we did it.
We did it, yeah. And it's just teamwork, it really is.
Yeah.
And I believe in that an awful lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe that anybody can play, any actor can play any character, and whether they're disabled or not, that doesn't really come into it, I don't think.
Whether they're good enough.
It's just whether they're good enough, they're inspired by the character.
Yes.
And I mean, we all have some characters that we look at and think, God, never, no.
I don't want to play that one.
But other characters that you inspired, and I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
So whether it comes down to the changes, it's just really kind of thing, again, physical changes like the staging. Whereas the script goes, it doesn't. I mean, if anything, actually having Mark playing the Doctor brought a fresh light to it. It was really nice that you brought, and because he was dying, and he had problems with him, physical problems
all the way through the play,
both mental and physical problems. Having a disabled actor, I'm sure you brought a different light to it, physically and mentally, which was really nice. It was fresh. Definitely.
Without having to try and act it.
Yeah. We didn't make a big thing of it, but the audience would have got that.
Yeah. Because all the dialogue's already there, isn't it?
Yeah. And it was really nice. It was nice to have Mark playing the role, definitely. Yeah. It's a star. You can pay me later.
I'll put the cheque in the post.
What were the challenges in taking on this role?
Well, there were quite a few, really. Firstly, because of my own disability, which, as you know, is cerebral palsy, my body naturally goes into spasm. And somebody who has been paralysed from the neck down, as Ken was, doesn't move hardly at all. So the challenge was really learning how to be as still as I possibly could, which was tricky at times.
You've played a number of characters recently who have taken their own lives. How do you feel about this as a disabled person?
Well, it's a really difficult question to answer because obviously as an actor you want to work and you want to take on those dramatic challenges. But it's fair to say that the last few roles I've played have very much been about that subject. In 2013, I was in a stage production playing a young girl with anorexia who wanted to top herself. In 2012, I played a young rugby star in an episode of the BBC soap opera Doctors, who also wanted to top himself, and here we are in 2016, and I've just completed another role, Ken, who wanted to top himself. So the question is really, as an individual, I definitely am against it. I very much enjoy life. I love many aspects of my life. I'm not going to sit here and say it's easy. I'm not going to say there aren't challenges. There are very difficult times sometimes. But I don't intend to go anywhere for a very long time yet.
How do you feel the media portrays disabled characters?
I think that the media definitely has disabled characters in two categories. The first being a superhero that's run at the Paralympics, and the second being a tragic victim, which I tend to be cast as a lot, really, which I think is really funny, considering I'm so happy. No, I think that the writers and writing needs to develop, and directors and casting directors need to open their eyes so that disabled characters aren't driven by their illnesses. They're driven by their emotional state of mind. They're driven by like any normal character in any situation.
How have attitudes changed over the years towards disabled roles?
I think attitudes haven't really changed that much. What's changed is that there are more disabled actors on screen now than there was when I was working nearly over 30 years ago. Partly because there are more people to choose from, partly because there's more choice, which is a good thing. There are more disabled actors out there. But as far as the roles are concerned, I don't think they're changed that much. When I was in my 20s, I played a young boy in a BBC drama series who'd become paralysed from a mugging and had to deal with all the angst and anger that went with that character, which was a wonderful role at that time and that age of my life. But going forward, really, I'm still playing quite similar roles on screen. Luckily, and I'm very glad to say, in the theatre and on stage, the roles have been far more varied. But because screen and film and television are very much about what you look like and very much focused on your physical attributes, those roles are something that I've embraced a long time ago to play, because one, it keeps me busy, and two, it keeps me working.
Mark, how did you find the rehearsal process?
Well, to begin with, I found it quite challenging, really. I was playing somebody completely against type. I was playing a young woman. I was playing somebody who was in their early 20s. I was playing somebody who wasn't physically disabled. So it was actually an awful lot to take on board and quite difficult.
What was it like playing a real person?
Most importantly for me, playing somebody who really does exist, especially knowing that she was actually going to see one of the performances today, was that I kind of found as much of the truth of her as I possibly could. That to me was the most important thing, to tell her story as truthfully and as honestly as I possibly could.
And how did you feel working in an integrated company?
I've worked in many integrated companies over the years, but I was really happy in this one, particularly because I was being cast purely as an actor and not as the token disabled person. Because the men in the company were playing women and the women in the company were playing men, you were able to be completely free with your ability to tell the story, and therefore I think the audience were able to think about the words rather than the physicality, so the words sort of shone out, really.
And finally, Mark, how did the audience react to the performance?
I think overall they really got it and they enjoyed it. And what was lovely for me particularly was to meet Ellie, who my character was based on. She came to one of the afternoon performances, which was lovely to meet her. she got quite emotional, quite teary, and later on that day she emailed the company to say that this was possibly one of the most important and wonderful days of her life. Arthur's journey really represents many people's journey in the sense that, you know, he really is the unspoken voice of someone trying to find their voice. And we decided quite early on in rehearsals to make him quite shy and quite timid, and deliberately so. Where's reception? I want to go home! I think one of the hardest things for me as, you know, as Mark, as an actor, was that there were an awful lot of similarities, and there are a lot of similarities to Arthur and myself, in that, yes, I have a voice, yes, I'm employed as an actor.
You're going to have to learn sooner or later that the
I
world
too
doesn't
had
care.
to find my independence, I too had to leave home, I too had to face the bureaucracy that goes with that, really. So an awful lot of especially the big monologues about his early life and about him finding his independence at the end came from my own life experience, really. It makes people laugh, it makes people cry, it makes people think, it challenges their perception, and really it does what it says on the tin. It does all the things we wanted it to do. I mean, this is really stretching a lot of boundaries in many, many areas, really. To do with sexuality, to do with disability, to do with acceptance, really, of all sorts of things, and many, many issues. I was accepted at a number of top drama schools at the age of 16 because of my ability to act, but because of my disability and the inaccessibility of the building, I wasn't able to go. There has to be a time where, you know, the lawyer, the secretary, the husband, the housewife could just happen to have a physical or invisible disability.
What sorts of things have you appeared in?
I've presented a children's programme called Playdays, which is for the BBC. I did a drama series a couple of years ago called Specials, which is about the voluntary police force, in which I played the son of one of the lead characters in that for a year. And I played an able-bodied boy who had become paralysed because of a mugging, and you know, I'm not paralysed.
Now this is a bit of a theme because you're normally in a wheelchair, although you're sitting here on the sofa.
Right. That's right.
And you've been in one all your life. You were born with cerebral palsy.
That's right.
And yet the parts you get are always a young man raging against having to be put into a chair after he's been able-bodied. Do you resent that?
I don't resent it. I get a bit tired of it because I'm not bitter. I hope, you know, I don't come across that way. And I'm very happy with my life. I worry greatly that producers and directors, and particularly writers, only view disabled people in that light.
And it's a very great pleasure to welcome Mark Beer, Simon Redwood in Specials. Great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
At what stage in your life, Mark, did you decide to become an actor?
I think very early on, really. I did a school play at the age of about 7, and because it was a special school and people were busting, you know, came from all over the place, and it was Christmas time and the snow was really heavy on the ground, so people weren't coming in, so I ended up playing lots of different parts rather than just the one.
And then you knew that not only did you want to be an actor, but that you were very adaptable as well, playing different roles. Now, the director of Specials, Chris Hodson, has said publicly that he wanted you for the role of Simon, not because you are disabled, but because you're a good actor. But how much of a challenge is it playing someone with a different disability to your own?
It's very hard. I mean, I think the hardest thing about playing the character was the fact that he was very angry and very bitter because he was obviously not born with a disability, and he became disabled because of a mugging in the series. And I went through 3 auditions for the part, and each time Chris kept saying to me, "Mark, are you sure you can be bitter and angry?" Because I came in beaming with a smile, and they weren't totally convinced.
How did you become bitter and angry then? How did you find that?
Well, it's not. I wouldn't say bitter. I obviously became bitter because of the thought processes and the things that I had to think about. Well, just there are so many
unpractical things which I have to deal with, in the sense that there are so many buildings inaccessible, there are so many negative attitudes towards someone with a disability that I live with on a day-to-day basis, that very often I just kind of put in the background. I had to bring those forward and think about them,
yes.
which wasn't very easy, really.
Not easy, not pleasant, but
no,
it got you to that level, I suppose, of anger for Simon.
It got the emotion that was necessary.
We've got masses of questions here, and the first one is from Jackie.
Did you find it hard getting a job because you're a disabled actor?
It was initially, yes. I think because there's a lot of fear to do with disability. It's the fear of the unknown. And until people know somebody with a disability or have worked with somebody with a disability, those barriers don't break down. But unless unless I have worked, like the series and like presenting or whatever I do, those barriers aren't going to break down.
Do you see the barriers coming down?
Very, very slowly, but they are. I'm glad to say, happening now.
Edward's got a question.
Did you have any problems with any of the scenes in specials?
I was thinking about this, yes, before I came, and the main problem, really, was the fact that some of the sets were very, very small, and because of the chair, in the series, my feet were actually strapped down to footrests, because someone who was paralysed wouldn't have any feeling, so therefore their legs wouldn't stick out.
They'd just be floppy, wouldn't
yes.
they? Rather than sticking out a bit.
My legs are in spasm all the time because of my disability, so the muscles just go like that all the time. So they had to put them in calipers, which are these things that go around your legs, and then they strapped them down onto the footrests, right? And so the chair was really bulky and really heavy, and I had to sort of lean back and push at the same time to balance it out. And because the door was so narrow, one of the doors was so narrow, I won't say which episode it was, but I just couldn't get through this door. And we had to keep doing it and doing it and doing it. But that was about it, really.
That was the extent which they just got the builders in, I suppose, to widen the doors.
It was just, yes, but then it's the thought process, isn't it?
Yes, it's actually thinking ahead that is going to be necessary.
That was going to be necessary, and all the way through through making the series, I was constantly advising people that the door handles were too high. If this person had actually lived in this house, there's no way that they would be. They would be altered for him, because this was his home.
In a way, Jessica's question follows on from that. Jessica.
Do you think disabled parts should always be given to disabled actors?
I think it's a very difficult question, but I think if the actor is right for the part is the most important thing. But I do think that disabled actors should be seen as well as able-bodied actors. And if they are right, and if they can actually act the part convincingly and very well, then there's no reason why they shouldn't. But if they're not right, then it should go to the best person for the job.
Exactly. I mean, the crux of the matter is it's whether you can act or not. That's the bottom line, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Mark, thank you so much for coming to Going Live today.
Thank you.
What about it, Simon? We work together sometimes.
Yeah, I know. Plain policeman.
We deliberately cast him. We spent a long time thinking about it because one has to be responsible. We could easily have cast an actor to play disabled, but it wouldn't have had the reality. Plus, we looked at disabled actors. We found one who could act, and that was the essential requirement. And we cast him in the role, and he's very good. His disability is not precisely the disability that we had in mind, but we have adapted to suit.
Obviously, by the fact that they've employed someone with a disability, it's a positive step in the right direction. And I hope one was employed on my acting ability rather than just my disability. But it's a case of only beginning to realise what's totally involved from the team I'm talking about. When you actually are there doing it. Disability awareness is something that you can't just automatically think of.
And do you think that organisations like the BBC and theatres and film companies have any idea of the kind of difficulties that people like you face?
No, I don't. I really don't think that. And I only think they realise it once they've taken the initial step to cast somebody. And then they begin to realise. It's like realism doesn't end after the take's over, in my case. Realism is my life. It is getting there. I think the art movement as a whole, to begin with, was pretty slow, and then now it's beginning to open up more so than it was a couple of years ago. To the extent where people are aware a little bit more of what's going on in the arts. Through mainly, again, media and theatre and everything else. But I think it's important that what people see as disability art, if you like, deals with the right forms of issues, of getting jobs and work in mainstream, competing with the able-bodied society and the conflicts one has to go through to get the jobs on an equal footing, which is what it's all about. And until those barriers are broken down, what you've just explained, we won't be taken in the media or the arts or whatever form. We won't be seen as a strong enough voice. No.